Magda. Today we're focusing on movement and taking a closer look at Sam Gilliam's 1970 piece, Carousel Change. Overall, Gilliam's practice really celebrates movement and shows colors interacting with each other in ways that we don't usually get to see when the canvas is stretched. Gilliam displayed his work through really interesting ways which interacted with the space, and a lot of his canvases, instead of being stretched in a rectangular shape, were draped to break the expected rectangular rhythm of a gallery show. While I can't show you the original image, here are 3 studies which kind of epitomize different parts of the piece and look at different aspects. I highly recommend that you look up the original piece, which is truly huge, just so you can get a better idea and look at the rest of his practice, which will be great inspiration for the work that we'll be doing today. Because Gilliam's pieces don't have characters or figures, we look at the colors and empathize with them. We project our own feelings, and we see these colors, while it is in a mirror, as a reflective surface. This is very typical for humans to just project ourselves or find different ways to empathize with objects which, from a very scientific point of view, don't have any feelings or sentience. Think about how the colors in Gilliam's piece make you feel. Are there certain colors that make you feel upset, vengeful, frustrated, maybe solemn, alone? Maybe there's some colors that make you feel serene, or some colors that make you feel nauseous and nervous. Maybe some colors that just make you feel whole and happy and content. There's no set definition of color. Red doesn't mean angry in every context, just like blue doesn't mean sad in every context. Every single culture has their own historical, mythological meaning behind colors. Just as there's no person or entity who's universally famous, there's no universal definition of color. Think about your personal relationship to these colors, and think about how these colors work together to make you feel that certain way. A set of colors from Gilliam's piece which bring out a strong emotion in you. This emotion might be anger or contentment. Whatever it is totally valid as long as you really feel it. Take these colors and choose a group of objects. They might be very significant to you or to a friend, as long as they're objects. Bring these objects together and play with the composition. Think of the objects as characters, even though they aren't necessarily figures. In this piece, they are subjects. Play with the composition and work with it until you get a composition that you feel like really has a strong narrative. Then, take the color palette you chose from Gilliam's piece and use that to illustrate this interesting narrative that you've brought together with these objects. Hey, welcome back to the studio. As you can see, I'm very hydrated. Also, we're covering object empathy and assemblage today. So bring together a group of objects that are significant to you for one reason or another, and play around with their placement in order to create a sense of narrative and emotion. How do these objects relate to each other? How can you bring them together so it shows envy or guilt or family or happiness or frustration? So play around with the placement and decide what emotion you want to exude through your objects. Then I'll go over some illustration techniques. So when I start working on an illustration project, I like to make it a little more fun, a little more approachable by making the first part kind of a game. Because sometimes, even if it's just a small idea, it can be so paralyzing to start because you have like a million ideas and you don't know what it wants to look like, or you know what you want it to look like, but you're not sure how you're going to draw it or paint it or depict it. So my go-to kind of game is doing everything in one line. So you can't pick up the pen or whatever you're drawing and then see how I can make that really different. So I chose to go with one line in orange, and so I used a different pen
for each of these to see if I wanted to like emphasize all the details and look at the water, or just look at like the really simple shapes, or make it feel more heavy and full, or if I wanted to show like the light coming through it. And so then I decided that I wanted to look more at movement. And so I knew I was going to carry over the oranges and the blues from Sam Gilliam's piece, and I wanted to see if I could incorporate movement in a way of like the water bottle spilling. And I really like the idea of having faces in it somehow. The cool thing with illustration is you don't have to draw from life necessarily. You can add things that you like or take things out that you don't. So you can change the shape of the water bottle or whatever you're drawing, or you can add faces to it or add expressive lines. And while I really like the faces idea, this looked very spooky, and I wasn't really about that. Because I wanted to focus on joy and silliness and lightness in the water bottle. And so I tried to take the faces and make them a little more fun by doing this and have like a subtle smiley face. And that just, I didn't really like that either. And I didn't like that there was the water spilling. It was just a lot and I wasn't enjoying it. So then I tried again by putting the face on the lid. While I didn't like this drawing very much, I liked that concept. So then I decided to run with that. The good thing about working in your sketchbook and working with illustrations and trying out a bunch of ideas is that even though it can be really, really frustrating to draw the same thing over and over and you're still not quite getting what you want, your idea is getting better and better and better because you're slowly building on it and you're letting yourself have that time to really marinate in it and fine tune it and see which parts of the idea you really like and which parts of the idea you could use or replace or come back to. And so I liked the face on the lid. And so then I tried a whole bunch of faces, not on the lid yet, but just in general. And so this was the first one we started out with, and we were still kind of on the spooky and a little scary rather than fun and joy. And I think that's partially just because the mouth is so big and the eyes are just looking out. And so I decided to try and make it funny by saying noise, which is just a silly way to say nice. Like, oh, that's really nice. And it just wasn't quite working, but I like the idea that the water bottle is talking to you. So then I made this water bottle that just to remind you that you're dehydrated, and that's why things aren't feeling as good as they should be. And the problem with these two is they look a little spooky and a little judgmental. Still not the direction we're trying to go in, and so we persisted, so that's good. And so I made this little yellow water bottle that says I'm proud. I made this little blue water bottle that says surprise. I made this little water bottle that says I don't know, because it's always okay to not know things. Nobody knows everything. We're all unsure and we're all trying anyways. And so I made this lovely napping water bottle that says it's gonna be all right. It's gonna be all right. The water bottle's just taking a nap. It's just, and sometimes a nap is what you need. So I decided, okay, while I like this, maybe let's go back to looking at how I can use the lid and seeing how we can maybe put a face on the lid instead of bottle. And so I did a whole bunch of different studies of lids, and I was getting, maybe let's try and go outside of the like color pencil, really thin lines, and use really thick lines with a Sharpie. And so this is kind of reminiscent of that one line. And so I was seeing maybe I can do some expressions without directly having a face in it. Although now that I look at this one, it looks like a face. If you put like, that's a nose, this mouth, this eye. And so I decided to keep on moving. And so I made like a really large yellow lid with a smiley face on it. Wasn't quite feeling it. And I liked how these lids came out with the different smiles on it and looking at these. And so I liked how these came out and I liked how these came out. So the real thing for me with illustration is that it's always a process and it takes time, but it's a fun process, and you can see how all these different ideas just bloom in the garden of your mind. And so that is just a good time. So let's look at how a bunch of other artists solve different problems when you're looking at illustration, how you bring emotion and color and energy into an object or a setting to tell a story.
So after changing these designs a lot, this is what I ended up with. I wanted to think about joy and silliness, but also in a more abstract way, spontaneity and how beautiful and exciting that can be. So if you think about it a little abstractly, this is a rain cloud, and I used the ridges from the water bottle, or really the water bottle lid, as the raindrops, and thinking about this hook that connects the lid to the water bottle as the rainbow coming out of the rain cloud, and the eyeball seeing the rainbow and talking about joy. It's a really simple shape, and now you can replicate your simple shape or your simple design, whatever emotion you've decided, and bring it into the public, whether that means taking your drawing and redrawing it in chalk on the sidewalk for your neighbors, your family, and other people to see and experience joy or whatever emotion that you chose. Or maybe you can replicate this and put it on your clothes if you want to, or on social media. Whatever you choose to do, take some risks, be careful, and make yourself proud.